I'm here with Dr. Kayte Susse.
Hi, how are you?
Great. It's great to be here. It's so serendipitous that I get to be here with you in person.
Yeah.
And I always joke around like social media and how toxic it is, but it's so great that that was how we connected. And then
Right.
look at it, here I am, maybe like a year or 2 years later. I'm like, hey, I just quickly sent you a DM. I'm like, hey, I'm on my way. Any chance we can
And
get
it worked
together?
out. And we've been wanting to do this for quite a while. And I wasn't ready because I was focusing on building this formula. And now I told you I wanted to wait until it was ready so we could talk about it, which we will.
I'm so excited. Your background, okay, and for anybody that doesn't know, is you're a chiropractor. You're like a functional medicine doctor, right? You have you have this new supplement that just came out. You have your own TV show. You got a lot of cool stuff you're doing.
Thanks.
And I found out that you're like a badass wrestler too.
I was really good at wrestling at one time, but I think now that would be an inaccurate statement. So
You were
retired.
all-American collegiate wrestler, pummeling boys. I saw you like suplexing somebody in your website. I was
Oh,
like, wow.
really? Is
Yeah.
that on my website you saw that?
Yeah, it was on yours. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. In
Yeah.
my health story, I think I shared a photo.
Yeah.
So that was the only time in my entire career that I pinned a male wrestler. I beat a lot of male wrestlers in high school, but it was always by points. So I would have to go the full 6 minutes, and I would always win by like 1 or 2 points if I won. So it was really hard to beat boys. But that particular match, he made a mistake, and I did a momentum move. It was kind of like a roll through cradle and pinned him, and it was in our district tournament. So it was on the news, and like people were taking photos, and I feel bad for the poor guy.
Don't feel bad.
Well, only because it was just so rare
Sure.
that I ever pinned anyone that was a boy,
Right.
male, and the fact that it was in this high coverage tournament, right?
Yeah.
So it was a good time. Yeah, and it was like all American against girls, and with against boys, I didn't ever place like in any major tournaments, but I did beat quite a few like in regular tournaments and dual meets. And then against women, I was a state runner up 2 years in a row in Florida, so second place.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's where you grew up in Florida.
Florida.
Okay. Very neat.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you. I'm always really curious, just like your people's story, like how you got here. Here's your story as a badass wrestler, and now you're like a functional medicine doctor. Like, when was the day that you realized, like, you know what, this is what I want to devote my life to, my passion?
So it was never obvious. I never thought a health route would be what would happen. I studied fine art, and I have a bachelor's degree in fine art, painting, and public relations minor, and had sort of a journalism background, writing, and then I started working in fashion. It was always these really creative fields. But as I got older, I mean, even just like into like mid 20s to late 20s, I was starting to notice more symptoms, really mild things that drew me into health and natural medicine. And I would say long before I had my health crisis, I was always very interested in natural medicine and learning about quote unquote detoxing. And now that I understand toxicity, I know now I was actually dealing with toxicity symptoms all throughout really my entire life.
Oh, wow.
But you don't, when you're a child and you have strong genetics and you have a pretty healthy lifestyle, a lot of times these things never don't slow you down. So there was never any warning bells that there was a problem going on. But I like to think about, it's just very interesting. Everyone's situation is different, but some people choose to cloud their epigenetic environment with drugs and alcohol or poor lifestyle choices, and they function just fine and think that it's okay. But it's just like, we all have to remember we all have different baselines. So some people who make those choices, like, we don't know where they could be if they weren't doing that. Like, could they be an Olympic athlete, right?
Right.
And so for me, I just, genetically, I think, I have some good genes when it comes to athleticism and energy and function, thank God. And then I was able to kind of, even being exposed to mercury through my whole life, I was able to function pretty well.
Yeah.
So anyways, I was getting into health, and then I had my serious health crisis after getting breast implants, but it took me many years to put that together to realize that the implants coming into my body was what was the assault. I started having symptoms within a year of getting breast implants, I started having really severe symptoms, but I still, I did think about breast implants, but I didn't know the toxicity profile of breast implants. And I didn't really understand at that time the way pre-existing toxicity affects our ability to create collagen around the implant to wall it off from our body. So in my particular case, and in the case of many people who have implant illness, their body doesn't do a great job of making that capsule of scar tissue around the device in the pocket of the chest. So their immune system is able to get into the implant more easily and mobilize microsilicone more easily, like little tiny pieces. So it doesn't really look like a rupture, and it's very hard. You can't really see it on imaging, but when you remove the implant, you can tell by the texture of it if it's sticky, if it has a gel bleed, and there can be varying degrees of that gel bleed. So in my case, my body started mobilizing that microsilicone pretty much immediately. And then things just started to get worse and worse and worse. And I was not eliminating it. I wasn't detoxing well. I had challenges with detox from my pre-existing toxicity, namely mercury.
Now, where was the mercury from? I'm just curious.
The mercury came primarily from amalgam fillings that broke. So when a person, a person can have amalgam fillings set in the mouth their whole life, and it will, to some degree, that is impossible to quantify. It will vapor off, like off gas is the term.
Yeah. And
that off gassing, it varies based on many factors, like the way it's put in by the original dentist, the way you chew gum or have hot liquids, like all of those factors. Yeah. So people will off gas to some degree. But if a filling breaks in the mouth, like spontaneously, where the tooth crumbles around it, there's really no denying that a large amount of mercury will get mobilized in that incident. And it's the same thing when an allopathic dentist removes a mercury filling by drilling it out without taking precautions the way holistic dentists do to dam that mercury. So in my case, like I had these amalgam fillings my whole life. For sure, they were off gassing again. It wasn't having a tremendous effect on my health. I do believe I received quite a bit of prenatal mercury from my mother, who also had many amalgams, like a whole mouth of amalgams. And then she breastfed me, which is also a way that mercury is passed. So I started with a high burden. I got my own silver fillings, which were off-gassing, and then I had 2 of them break in my mouth, one a couple years before I got breast implants, and then one the year right before breast implants. And even with all of those things, they still didn't take me down. But what mercury does really well is it does a really good job of blocking your detox pathways and really interrupting your methylation. So sometimes the mercury itself will create a lot of symptoms that can be debilitating. And for some people, it just shuts down your pathways enough where you start to collect everything you get exposed to from there on out. So like all of us are getting exposed to metals and chemicals and toxins and pollen and just like, different assaults all the time. And some people's bodies are very good on just on a daily basis, as long as you're drinking water and eating healthy and sleeping, you're able to kind of eliminate it as it comes in so that it doesn't really cloud your epigenetic environment too much. And then in my case, like it was just like a big freeway semi truck just laying over the freeway of my pathways. So then all this microsilicone starts coming into the traffic jam, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And then that was when my symptoms began, like the severe symptoms. And that, so I'm just going on and on.
No, I love this.
Headphones. I can't hear anything.
I know. Sorry. So just so you know, I'm missing a cord that would connect it so we could actually hear each other. But
okay,
it
no
is
problem.
I know. Yeah.
I feel like I'm talking to myself. Like
no,
in a booth.
No, you're good. This is great. So one of the things you mentioned about the microsilica, though, when you were talking about that,
silicone, different than silica. But
my question is doesn't that happen though? Always. Like, I mean, if you're putting something foreign into the body, isn't it always going to associate this as like a foreign or can women get breast implants and it's safe to do so?
Yeah, so you do not always have gel bleed. What happens in a healthy person, when what we want to happen is the body is really smart and it sees that this is a foreign object and it will immediately begin to wall it off. So you start making a really nice capsule of collagen that your body builds, right, from raw materials.
Yeah.
There is many ways that collagen pathway can get haywire. And one of the primary reasons it happens, well, there's two that I can alert you to. One is an example would be a person who has a disease like Ehlers-Danlos, which is a collagen disease. So these are people who have like hypermobility of tissue that's genetic. And like those are people they don't scar very well. And those are people who are also not going to make a great capsule of collagen around a breast implant. So if you have that disease, like I would never recommend that you put a breast implant or any type of silicone device in your body for that reason. But that's a very rare disease, so it's not common. I did work with one patient who had that though, and it was very interesting putting these things together. So there are ways that chemical toxins can almost create hypermobility by deranging collagen. And that works through the histamine pathway. Hypersecretion of histamine chronically in the presence of toxins or allergens will break down type 4 collagen and will derange your ability to make nice capsule. So again, we're talking about in a wrong situation, but in a right situation, you make a nice capsule of collagen around the implant. And it's not too much and it's not too little, because if it's too much, that's a negative aesthetic outcome in plastic surgery that we call capsular contracture, which is where you get this like hardening and like lifting up of one breast. And some people do that as well. So we want to balance collagen and have like a healthy collagen response. So it's not too much, it's not too little. And if you get that right capsule, the immune system will not be getting in as easily to be pulling off little pieces of silicone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I was going to ask is based on your experience and your knowledge, because I have a friend, and she said, well, there's some research that suggests you don't get the implants removed. In your understanding, based on everything you know, is there a debate? Like if someone says like, Dr. Kayte, should I get my implants out? Would you say without 100% of the time, absolutely?
So I used to say that, and then I realized that it's this big fight that you get into with people, because there's women and people who want these things. They want them, and it doesn't matter what you say, and it doesn't matter how toxic they are. And it doesn't matter what's been going on with their health. It's just like people are very committed to augmenting. Yeah. This is the reason why the pharma companies that manufacture breast implants were able to get them put back on the market after they were removed from the market. Because of extreme health problems that happened in the 90s, the FDA took them off the market. But they still got put back on the market because these pharmaceutical companies demonstrated a demand. Okay. So I've come to a new place when it comes to augmenting and aesthetics, and I still augment all the time in different ways. And I make healthy choices with regard to toxins, namely because of my chemical journey and the fact that I have to be more careful now, I still am detoxing, but in any event, people want it. So we have to meet them where they are. Yeah. And figure out how to coexist. So should everyone take them out? If you're a woman, if you're having symptoms and it's obvious that there's a relationship there, but there's people who are healthy with implants. And this is why I made the formula I made, because
we're going to talk about that.
So we could go on. I could go on and on about like the psychology behind the concept.
From a health standpoint, though, you would say yes. But you understand, you're compassionate. People are going to make their choices. And so
I think it depends, like from a health standpoint, like where the person is in their life. And if they're prepared to have a serious surgery, it's harder to remove implants than it is to put them in.
Yeah, so better. You have a great story about that.
Yeah. So, and especially like if you want to take them out with using en-bloc capsulectomy, which is a more complicated procedure where they don't open the capsule inside the body, which in my opinion is the better way to do the surgery. But it does make the surgery more complicated, and it requires like a certain type of surgeon that has that skill, and it requires larger incisions. So if a person hears that breast implants might have or do have a toxic chemical profile, and they start to think that it's probably something that they eventually want to remove them, but maybe like they're not ready financially or physically or just their lifestyle, they're just not ready. So what do we do? Like, how can we mitigate that so that they're not having fear and panic and other things that adversely affect your health, like
Emotions,
thinking, oh my God, there might be something really horrible. Well, so it's like we have to just calm down and kind of like address it in this sort of systematic, logical approach. It's not about, I don't want to instill fear and panic and say you have to remove your implants. So, but we all do stuff that's bad for us anyway, right?
Yeah.
And we're not like dropping dead if we smoke a cigarette.
Right.
Doesn't mean cigarettes are good or that, right? But so.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I think I always tell people too, it's like, it just depends. Like right now, you and I are being bombarded by 5G and EMFs, but it's just like,
not in this office,
not in here, not in Dr. Hank's
blockers.
office, but it's like how many cuts, are you really going to take? You just kind of have to kind of figure that out for yourself. Like there's only so much we can do, and you have to be like, there has to be some calmness. Otherwise you're going to go nuts. Also though, from what I understand, breast implants can also grow mold pretty easily. Is that right too? And then now you have cysts. Then people are like, I have fibromyalgia. I have all these other kind of symptoms.
So I haven't. Okay, well, you can have fibromyalgia from breast implants without it being related to mold.
Mm-hmm.
Mold can be a concern for people with saline implants that were placed. There was sort of an era of saline implants where there was a mechanism where during the surgery you would kind of fill it through a valve mechanism, and that valve is not a perfect mechanism. So for some people, it sometimes over time, the valve and then the actual implant, which contains saline, would get infiltrated by pathogens in the pocket. I would say it's not super common. It's not something I see a ton of, but for sure, if that happens, you're going to be seeing a lot of issues.
Yeah.
It's not something that you really know until you explant. If you have a saline implant, some of the more healthy people I've seen with breast implants are people who have the older saline implants. Those are people who they don't have mold in them. So let's just say they have an older saline implant that does not get infiltrated by pathogens. Just to say that it can happen because that valve mechanism. So when you look at the newer ones, like they don't have that valve, and then especially with silicone filled implants, there's no saline water. So you would only be looking at mold in a saline implant. And in that situation, it's rare. And then for a lot of people with these older saline implants, if they do have problems, it's typically an autoimmune problem, which only happens usually in people who have this predisposition towards becoming autoimmune. So you kind of have to be wired that way genetically to turn on a disease like that in the presence of a foreign device. So that's not going to happen with everyone again. Different problems with different people. There's different ways that problems can happen and not happen. So to answer the question, with silicone filled implants, mold is not typically an issue.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that there can't be a pathogen situation happening in the capsule and around. And with my sort of naive understanding of breast implant associated large cell lymphoma, there's been suggestion that something to do with the texture of implants, like the textured implant, which was the one that was recalled by Allergan, that maybe there's a pathogen attraction when it comes to texture. I've heard different theories about this. So, but again, that's not like inside the implant.
Gotcha.
Now you do have like the vagus nerve, which, travels right through here, and it can really, there's a lot of mast cells here. And, whenever there is pathogen stuff happening, it can really kick off histamine pathways and affect vagal neuro, communication with the brain. So.
Okay. Very cool. So I wanted to talk to you then, about your supplements. It's like, what do you have the solution to all of this?
So the initial solution, or the initial problem I was trying to correct for was, and by the way, all of this happened because when I attempted to go into private practice after graduating and being extremely ill and almost dying, I just couldn't. I could not function in private practice. So I started thinking about like other ways I could contribute and like how I could, in lieu of like treating patients. And also as a chiropractor, I had a lot of women contacting me for help with breast implant illness recovery. So there's a lot of people that remove their implants and are still really sick, and they try to follow the advice in the support groups. And it's just hard for people, even if they have experience with it, if they don't have a true intimate clinical understanding of like the mechanisms of the body's pathways.
Yeah.
It's just hard for them to they're shooting in the dark to figure out how to get better. We really wanted to help those women. Treating them in private practice is a little complicated because of the scope of my practice and the way our medical system is wired. So it's almost like I'm de-incentivized from, well, it's also, you can't treat a disease that it's an unacknowledged. It's just like very complicated.
Yeah.
And then if they actually have a disease like an autoimmune condition or something, it's like you're dealing with a co-management situation, and it's complicated.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, like, what are ways that I can educate people? And I've been doing that as much as possible through social media and through like shows like this and spreading the word, and spent a lot of time doing that. And then I began designing a detox kit that was aimed at addressing the pre-existing toxicity, because again, that's like usually for most people that are not getting better after ExPlant, it's like, well, what is in your body that's blocking your pathways?
Yeah.
And like in my case, I wasn't able to even begin eliminating microsilicone until I cleared mercury and lead. And those are the heaviest of the heavy metals. So when you look at the periodic table, like these are really deep in the tissue. They are bind to like sulfur in the organs, and they're not floating around as readily. It's harder to even chelate them, especially if they're in the brain.
Wow.
It becomes complicated. So you have to, anyways, so I started making a detox kit, and then, there's so many great detox things already on the market that we've all used. And then the truth is that the real chelators are not even available as supplements. Like these are pharmaceutical products, and my favorite is not even FDA approved. It's like in trial now. It's aramide. Aramide. We used to call it OSR, but it's available in other countries, so people still get it and take it here. And I just am like praying like their approval goes through. It's very hard to prove a drug works for chronic mercury when it's hard to test for chronic mercury. It's easy to test for acute mercury, which we don't have prevalently in the United States, acute mercury exposure, but in South America and like gold mining, that's how they were able to pass. That's how they were able to have approval in other countries through those studies of acute toxicity, and then showing when they take this chelator it works. So anyways, so building a really ethical, great. So I just figured like, okay, so I'm going to make this supplement kit. It's just going to be more supplements that people buy and take. And what does it do? I just didn't want to like do that.
Yeah.
So I started thinking, okay, what if we could figure out, and I was talking to people, and everyone like some of my guy friends that are just like entrepreneur bros that are they are not in health. And they're like, well, we want them to keep their implants. Like, how do we keep it? And just like, and I was getting so angry, like hearing these responses, just like, oh, you guys just don't get it. And then I started thinking like, let me get my ego out of this and like my attachment to like what I want. Mm-hmm. Why fight this? Like, why not help? And then I was like, well, that would be impossible because they're so bad. Right. But then just, through what I was exposed to and learning, I just started to finally like figure out, okay, actually, like what is it in a healthy person? Why do they really make this capsule, and why are they okay? But the truth is there's a lot of people that are really healthy with implants. Okay. And really cool. So it's like figuring out why some people are healthy and why some people aren't, and then what are the factors in the middle, and then trying to work with supplement regulations, which cannot treat or prevent anything. Right. And then trying to avoid talking about a gray area illness, which is you're not allowed to even say the word illness when you're talking in supplement terms. Like that's a flag, right? Mm. So, there's been a learning curve, and but it really did it. And the formula, again, it doesn't treat or prevent, it supports your health with it, but we're thinking about ways that collagen might get deranged. My patent is all about collagen in the capsule and how to create nice scar tissue capsule in response to an implant being put in your body. Mm. I also supported all of these other things that can go wrong, and things I know, I don't even know if I'm allowed to say go wrong. I have to be really like careful how I talk about it. Yeah. In people who have challenges with detox, the most common thing we see are issues with methylation. So of course I put methyl donors, like methylated B vitamins. I included ingredients that help the body remove exogenous estrogens, so chemical estrogens. And those ingredients are things like calcium D-glucarate, which we know, like when your body does a nice job of wrapping up, like when the liver conjugates and wraps up these xenoestrogens for elimination, and then you have enzymes in the gut that will then in an unhealthy dysbiotic gut, then they will unwrap those packaged xenoestrogens and then put them back in the bloodstream. So it just keeps going in a cycle. So things like calcium D-glucarate help to downregulate those enzymes. And in conjunction with vitamin A, they've been studied for their positive effect on breast health and breast cancer prevention. Not that my product it's not about that, but just to say that those ingredients are great for women's breast health. I included the full spectrum of ingredients that modulate the T regulatory system, which is the system which is most responsible for the support of pathways related to autoimmune disease. So when we look at someone who has an autoimmune disease, like we try to say like, well, what in their gut is missing? Like, what are they not absorbing that would support T regulatory cells? And those are things like things that recycle glutathione. Those are fat soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. Things like vitamin C, which recycles glutathione, glutamine, which I was really back and forth on because I didn't want people to react. A lot of people are sensitive to thiols and things like that. But then again, this is not for unhealthy people. Like if you're unhealthy and you're having symptoms, like you need to be working with someone and figuring out that plan. This is for healthy people, so that we make sure that they get all these raw materials so that, you know, they support their body and stay healthy, right? And have the proper responses to foreign devices and foreign chemicals. That's what this product is. And I think I touched on all basically like the three components. So we're talking, so supporting detox, supporting collagen, supporting the immune system. That's what this formula is.
It's amazing. I mean, as I'm listening to you talk too, I feel like even if you didn't, you could use this, like, I mean, during the pandemic, this could have been an amazing supplement. Really, I mean, you're talking about T cells and T regulatory. I mean, like that's huge, I think.
The truth is that this formula is a really great anti-aging formula for anyone who wants to support their collagen system in the exposure and their immune system in the presence of toxins. So it can really be taken by anyone in like the modern world. But when it comes to marketing and you know, a business model, it's like, I have to say, you know, we have to find like our real niche like base, and those are people getting breast implants. So
yeah,
I can't
I love
say
that.
like everyone needs it, but I have had quite a few people who I gave it to that just wanted to support their health, and they really like it and they've seen positive. I even had someone tell me, and this is not a claim, but I have a friend who was having issues with cysts, fibrous. Like she has a hormonal cyst or related to, so she started taking this and her cysts went away. And again, that's not a study, so I'm not saying that the formula did that. But if I were to create an argument for why it would help with cysts, it's hormones and it's getting rid of the estrogen dominance. So like things like calcium D-glucarate and vitamin A have been studied for their role in helping to balance and like remove those, you know, estrogens. So potentially that could have been. It could also have been how we were supporting methylation. It could have been how we were supporting her gut health with the formula. All of those things are going to happen. So and the dosage is such that it can be taken daily without overwhelming the body. So it can be taken daily without, you know.
Nice. And then how does it, because you were mentioning like collagen fibers and type 4, like how does it specifically go after that collagen? Is it
what
just
it's doing
the
is
precursors or?
Absolutely. No, it's not. And that's a great, thank you for asking that, because this works very different than other collagen supplements that you might see on the market.
Vital proteins, like just go and throw some on bulletproof coffee.
So we're not giving you collagen. What we're doing is we're preventing your body from breaking down collagen by modulating your MMP9 pathway, which is the histamine pathway. So when, like we were talking about earlier, when you have circulating chronic allergens or toxins, it's creating a priming of your mast cells to like hypersecrete histamine. And our bodies work on priming in many like cellular systems, which we can, you know, talk about in parallel. Like we see this with insulin. I mean, this is why people end up with diabetes, because, you know, you eat like one cookie, or sorry, one day you eat. Okay. So let's say like you, Dr. Haig just walked in and he made me self-conscious because I'm like, he's going to check my math on all the pathways. So like when you eat a bag of cookies, you're going to secrete a ton of insulin to manage like all that glucose that just came in. And then the next time you go and you open the bag of cookies, and your brain and your body and your pancreas you eat, like, let's say you eat one cookie, but your body's like, oh, she's going to eat a whole bag. So let's just go ahead and secrete all the insulin.
Yeah.
And so that's what priming is. Like, our bodies love to work on priming. And I don't know why it's like this. The same thing happens with addiction in the brain with dopamine. You know, you start thinking about an activity that gets you really excited. And next thing you know, all the dopamine's coming. That's priming. And the same thing happens with your mast cells and histamine. So when you have this constant circulation of low-grade toxins, then people know this, like when they have mast cell disorders, like they could eat one little thing and their body's just ready to kick it off. Like, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to support the integrity of the mast cells, and we're trying to dampen that pathway. And the nutrients I included are things that do that. So again, when you're hypersecreting histamine, you're breaking down type 4 collagen. And that's how a toxicity patient can eventually over time develop this hypermobility. So there's a lot of crosstalk between the skin matrix and the brain with and IGF-1. And I'm not going to go into like, it's too much
That's
to go
a whole
into,
nother topic, huh?
But it's very interesting that you can see these traits that we see in Ehlers-Danlos patients, and you can see these same traits in people who have chronic toxicity and hypermobility as a result, which can be reversed in those people, in toxicity people. I'm one of them. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to ask you actually a question about the ExPlant process.
Sure.
But before I do that, is there anything else that we should mention about the supplements? Because it's really innovative.
Well, right now, like, it's still very much in a startup phase. Like, it is for sale. You can go to drkates.com with an S and you can buy the formula. I'm really like looking for feedback from people who take it, and also just like anyone who, if there's anyone who has like financial need, I still have bottles, like they'll come in this eco pure plastic. So I can send this to anyone who like wants to help me with marketing and in exchange for a bottle, because I still have a couple hundred of these free bottles left. Okay. So you'll get it in plastic. The one you buy will come in glass. This is actually eco pure plastic, so it'll biodegrade, but in any event.
Both the same, but we were talking, we like the glass bottle.
I like
better.
the glass better. It looks better.
It looks
better.
Sharp.
Yeah. They're both environmentally conscious.
Actually, have you, I know this is like a newer product, but have you been able to see any and again, we can't make any claims or anything, but just any like testimonials from other than like the cysts, but like other women with breast implants? Like, what are you seeing?
So like what I've got, the feedback I've gotten is like people are reporting better energy. They're reporting like better GI function. They're reporting better sleep. They're reporting, like, some of them are reporting skin changes. Like, they have this like tightening effect, which has a lot to do with the collagen blend and how it affects skin. So, I would love to be able to do more studies around it, which will come in time as like the company builds and as like a partner with people. I'm working on that right now. So
yeah, that's exciting. That's really cool.
And I really would like this product to be like in the hands of plastic surgeons who are selling implants, because I would like them to go right alongside implants, which I think just makes sense. And there's really not a product. There's nothing like it. And I'm not really sure that there's very many people in development that truly understand the nature of the problem. Like, having experienced it firsthand and been doing research and development in this area for the last 6 years, I have not run across anyone else doing that. So
wow.
I'm sure the day will come when someone will be like, hey, look, there's another breast implant formula. And it's going to be like, I'm going to have to deal with those feelings from a business perspective about it, but it's not bad. It's like I want as much help in this space as possible. And it's good to remember that.
Hey, how about this though? Why not? And I'm just curious. I'm not a marketer, but why not name it like breast implant formula? I'm sure something totally against
it's silicone support formula.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the reason I called it Dr. Kayte's is because, well, for one, I had no idea if this endeavor would really bear fruit, and so when I had my angel investment, I was like, this should be at least and I'm just telling you like my perspective, like this is just, maybe we shouldn't talk about this. But I wanted to do something that would help like the just grow the mission and and silicone support formula is underneath. It's just smaller. I want to make more products, so that'll come in time.
Yeah, that's exciting. But the neat thing is that it says Dr. Kayte's, but you are the brand. Like, you've gone through it. Like, not many people can say that. And like, even just hearing your story of like, I mean, even when you realize like, oh, I want to get the implant out, that was just such a difficult journey as well. Like, people were saying, sorry, you can't. You did an MRI and it showed actually there's no leakage. Like, what's the problem? Right? There is no leakage. And so I think you flew to Florida to get it removed, and then they said you can't, and then you had to fly back.
Yeah,
And so it's really a journey. Maybe you could talk about
yeah,
that.
like my explant, everything that happened around explant was just the most, it was so crazy and it was a really like bad time like medically for me in my life. Everything went wrong in my body, but yeah, explant can be challenging. A lot of women, this is what I see, and this happened with me. Like sometimes women, by the time they get to explant, their health is in such crisis that it can become challenging to have a surgeon. Now remember, this is not like a heart surgeon or someone used to dealing with someone with disease, or even really from a malpractice perspective, like supported to do those types of surgeries. So when you're talking about an elective plastic surgery, this is not something that's usually done on really sick people. So like usually people who are sick, they're going to be like told, we don't want to operate on you, like by an aesthetic surgeon. So again, these are not surgeons that are set up to do that, right? Mm-hmm. So it gets really complicated in explant because the only people who are super qualified to do an explant are these aesthetic surgeons, right? So I see a lot of these women getting turned away by plastic surgeons. And of course, there's a subset of mastectomy, cancer specialist surgeons who some of them are doing explant and en bloc. But again, they're not used to working with as much with breast implants. It's just really complicated to find like the right expert. So a lot of these women, sometimes they're turned away by plastic surgeons when they need to explant. And in my case, I had something kind of like that happen where by the time I got to the surgeon I had initially chosen, I had gone through this horrible event of like what we thought was trigeminal neuralgia, and I had lost like maybe like 10 or 15 pounds. So I had like no fat. And then there was a very, very tiny, paper thin scar tissue capsule. And so the surgeon was super concerned about, one, not being able to do en blocs, also like perforating like another part of my body. The outer part is there's no fat really to buffer. Ended up doing the surgery with Dr. Jay Chung, who's probably like the most famous explant surgeon. And I didn't want to see him because he was more expensive and I was a student and I was really trying to go like the budget route. And it just ended up being like something I had to prioritize. And he did a perfect en bloc capsulectomy in 50 minutes that I was under. Wow. So, and he told me prior, probably won't be able to do en bloc because of the situation. So manage your expectation, but he still did it. So he's like, so if you're a complicated case, like go to someone like him. You know, there's a handful of people that are like him in the scene, but he's a microsurgeon and he's just so experienced. So if you were like, you know, talking to surgeons about it and they say, oh yeah, I can do that, just try to like get some photos of previous surgeries. And most of them are being really transparent and they're sharing all of their en bloc success photos. Mm-hmm. And you can find out very easily. And I remember the surgeon in Miami that I was initially going to see, like he had said he would, and he was scrolling trying to find a photo for me. I just couldn't find one to show me. And he finally found one. I was like, oh, here, this is when I did. And like Dr. Chung, it's like his Instagram is hundreds of just.
Okay, so on that note about the explant, I'm curious for women out there that are interested in doing this, and you gave some good recommendations, but like, is there a website or is there something that they can do, or would you just recommend, like, if this is something they're serious about, like, go here and then start your journey, or go to Dr. Kayte's website?
My website is not super, like, I've done some things on Instagram. Most of like the content where has been in podcasts. So if they visit my Instagram, there's a link tree that I included a link to the website Healing Breast Implant Illness by Nicole, and that's sort of like the foundational explant support group and breast implant illness support group, which I was part of when it was really small. It was like under 10,000 women, and now it has like over 100,000 members.
Wow.
And like inside that group, there's just like there's people who have firsthand experience with everything you could possibly go through, from breast implant associated large cell lymphoma testing, which is like sometimes needed prior to explant if like they have this cancer. It's rare, but you know, they need to have, it's just, there's so many like different things that they should know. And even if it's a simple explant where the person's reasonably healthy, just tips about like what type of pillow to buy. And like, you know, there's a lot of people that they just are in there all the time supporting women through that process. Like I'm not so much working with that. I'm more in like the weeds of chronic toxicity and how to support that on a cellular level.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm not interested in helping people with ExPlant. I am, but there's just so many like caring women and wonderful people in that group that they can really like lean on for that emotional support, which can be so helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also like finding surgeons, finding the lists of surgeons that people have gone to that were good and stuff like that. So I think that is super helpful.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm only asking this. I have a friend who has implants and wanted me to ask you this.
Okay.
Is there like a true lifespan of implants that you could you say? Do we know? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the lifespan concept is a little bit BS. But they will say 10 years is the official answer.
That's not that long. 10 years goes by like that, before you gotta get
I don't really think that they know because it's like everybody's body performs differently. So we can guess what happens in the body. The truth is there have not been long-term studies. So when Allergan and Mentor first applied for approval in 2005 or 6, I think it happened in 2006. So they must have began their studies prior. They had 2 or 3 year studies and they promised the FDA they would finish them. And they were supposed to be 10-year studies. The FDA gave them a design that they wanted them to follow because, they were trying to do it right the second time around after the horrific problems of the 90s, the 80s and 90s. So everyone kind of got back in the game with good intentions, but then those studies never were finished. So we still don't have that information. And part of the new lobbying in the last few years and the legislation changes have been around getting those studies back going. So as far as I know, they're now finishing them, or they're supposed to be finishing them. So we have to just hope that they do and that we get more information about lifespan. But, 10 years and like looking at, regular MRIs every couple years, and being careful with mammograms. And I would avoid IV contrast if at all costs, if possible. So it's not necessary to have contrast. And I know that that's like a personal decision between the doctor and the patient, but I personally have seen gadolinium contrast like remaining in the body longer than it's supposed to with these breast implant illness women. Again, they're challenged with eliminating. So
yeah.
And we know this about gadolinium. Like if you have any kidney clearance problems, you're not allowed to get gadolinium contrast. It's contraindicated. But getting these MRIs can really tell you if there's a bad rupture. They're not going to show you gel bleed though. So.
Mm-hmm. Which is what you had.
It's what I had. Yeah. There's never a simple answer to things like that. So
I would imagine that could be really common. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting reading your story. I always thought too, the rupture, obvious, but like women could be having these symptoms and just it's like constantly just like scraping them every day and they just don't know, right?
Absolutely. And it's like an all day, all night thing. Whereas like when you're choosing consciously to consume things that are bad for your body, like usually you have this like 8-hour sleep window that you can detox and eliminate, or at least not be consuming. Like even you look at like people who have addiction to alcohol or other substances, like they usually don't consume those substances 24 hours a day. So even those people are eliminating.
They get to detox.
Right? Yeah. Whereas when you're battling the toxins that come from implants, if they are mobilizing severely, you don't get any break from it. So you can see the onset of like these epigenetic switches much faster. So potentially a disease that wouldn't manifest until you're much older might happen when you're younger, just due to like the clouding of your internal environment.
Mm-hmm. Are there any symptoms that you see typically for just the majority of women that's like very common and like, it probably has to do with like this would tip me off to say that you're not doing this isn't healthy for you, because we were talking about in the beginning, like for some women they do great, for some others they don't.
I would say things like joint and muscle and body pain in the absence of like a diagnosable autoimmune condition against the joints. Like even though if you do have that autoimmune condition like rheumatoid arthritis or lupus or scleroderma, any other connective tissue ailment, and you have breast implants, like there's a very clear relationship there, like that we've seen time and time again. But if you have that body pain and joint pain and fatigue and brain fog, which kind of like seem to go to collectively in this fibromyalgia umbrella diagnosis, and fibromyalgia is like a we don't know diagnosis. So if you have that type of thing going on and you have breast implants, like I would be thinking really about the implants.
Okay.
Especially like in the absence of any other disease that can be found.
Yeah.
But then it's sort of complicated because if you find a disease, and it's like a chicken and egg, 'cause you could have a disease before you get implants, but like
Sure.
it's going to be really hard for you to get that disease managed and under control and like in reverse when you are fighting like an internal toxicity.
Yeah.
So
Love that. Okay. You know what I found really interesting about you is that when I was looking at your website, you had all these selfies from the beginning of your journey.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, wow, I was just amazed. Like, did you know at like the time, like I'm taking these because I'm like watching myself. Like I wouldn't have been able to like cognitively be like, I'm going to take photos of me being sick. And like, but like, I almost like wonder, like, did you know, like, I'm going to heal myself one day, but you had so many, and it's actually really helpful because if I'm someone that is, you know, wanting to learn more about, you know, honestly, like what you have here, your product, and just where you've gone, and like to see your journey from, you know, this lack of vital force to this vibrancy, like it's actually really helpful.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know in my for myself, there's no way I would have been like, I'm going to take some selfies of myself. Like, I feel like crap. And like,
well,
I thought that was
I think
interesting.
some of the photos that you saw were just photos, not selfies. So it was like things from that were around. I remember specifically taking photos of myself when I was having my like quote unquote trigeminal neuralgia crisis.
Yeah.
Because we did not know why it was happening, and all of my colleagues were like I was in a state of crisis, and they were like, send me a photo of your face. Like they were looking for asymmetries, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. And it ended up being a tooth, like a root canal that had abscessed insidiously. And it abscessed. The particular tooth was right next to the trigeminal nerve branch, where it loops under this foramen right here. So we had explored a dental connection, and the dentist had cleared me and said that it wasn't my tooth, which, you know, that ended up, we circled back on that. But 35 days later, after like extreme tormenting 24-hour a day, like extreme shock, like pain from the trigeminal nerve getting lit off from the peripheral tooth, but yeah, those ones that you probably saw, you were like, and I remember I took a selfie before I explanted. This is a big thing in the community that the women like to take their selfie, and then they take one immediately after surgery, and you see this clarity in the eyes, and you see this like sort of lifting of even the complexion. But it tends to be like a honeymoon window, and then usually it's followed by a period of detox. So and then the same thing happens in amalgam removal, where when you do like a healthy, good amalgam removal, they have this honeymoon period of energy, and then usually the symptoms return as now the body feels like it can begin eliminating what's stored. So I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that was great.
It could just be like somatic narcissism at its finest, but this is the culture.
That's definitely not what I meant. And I think maybe if you thought the word selfie, but I just meant it was actually really helpful.
And
I was so I was really like, I'm like, man, that is amazing. That I always think like things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
And I'm very believer of like just source energy and just like that connection and vibration. And so anyways, when I saw it, I was like, wow, like that's amazing that she documented this, because it's so helpful to see who you were then and like who you are now. And like, it gives really hope a lot to women. And I thought it was really cool, but I just thought, man, like I know for me, even if I thought like one day I'm going to beat this and like I'm going to show people like this is how I was, right? I don't think I would have cognitively been able to do it. So I thought it was great, and I'm glad you did. So.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I think I had to like hunt for a lot of that when I was putting together that story. It wasn't like it just was like
it wasn't just like perfectly in your iPhone, right?
No. But yeah, as I guess I came from like a fashion and photography background, and was sort of like in the habit of documenting. So
that's great.
Yeah.
I wanted to do some lightning round questions with you.
Oh, okay, great.
But before I do, is there anything else that you wish I had asked you?
No, I think you're a great question. Thank you. Really great. Like I've never been asked a lot of these questions, so it's kind of cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm curious if the old you could see the new you, what would the new you say?
If the old me could see the new me, is that what you said?
Yeah. What would the new you say to your old self?
What would I say to my old self?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's
I know it's a tricky question. I always have to rephrase it. I know.
So I've answered this so many times, but each time I give a different answer because there's so much you could say, right?
For sure.
And of course, like we're not trying to live with regret. one of the ways I answered in the past, I said, there was super dark windows of time, and I wish I had been able to tell myself, like, you're going to get through it. Cause like there's a lot of despair when you're really in the thick of things and you don't see the light and you don't know what's coming. So it's so important to like not lose faith and like trust life and just like, this is something like it would be helpful to tell myself today. Like we're always there, right? We're always like what keeps you going, so that's always good. I'm just trying to think if there's anything new I can come up with that I would tell myself now at this point today. It's just like maybe to relax a little bit, like just
I can relate to that.
Just like there's no huge rush, like nothing is as serious as you think in the moment. Like time heals, like time moves forward. So those are the lessons, right?
I love that. What are some choices that you think you made that you think made you who you are today?
Well, all of them, obviously.
Yeah, you're here.
We're all like a consequence of all the choices that we make. That's all we are, right? It's a consequence.
Is there one though that just stands out to you? Maybe it was even just childhood or just your determination to like push forward or just to not give up or just anything.
I had this really interesting experience earlier with Dr. Scott, who was here, who's a network chiropractor, and he does a lot of like intuitive energy work. And something that he brought to my attention today, which was just so powerful, was he was telling me like, look, like half the people I see draw from their past experiences to push them forward, and the other half draw from like the future and what could be and like the promise of like the future.
Yeah.
Then he was like, you're one of those people. And now I'm like thinking about it and trying to absorb it. And it's true. It's like when you need power in the moment, what do you draw from that gives you strength? And you can draw from the past and like what you've accomplished, which I don't do. But like, I guess, and it's true, like drawing from like the optimism of what you want to be and what you want to build. And I think that's like something I could thread through my whole life. It's always been that way. And part of it is just that I have like a natural excitement about the unknown and adventure. And so I think that has been like the driving factor in all of the things I've done. So like things that scare me are the things I'm most attracted to.
Wow.
Unless it's like emotional fears, and then that's like a whole other like I need to get a therapy for that. But when it comes to just like regular experiences, if it's scary, I usually like want to like uncover it and do it. So
yeah. Wow, that's great. I'm curious, you're such a force in the wellness world with everything you're doing.
Thank you. I don't know if that's true, but I thank you. I appreciate that.
I think so.
Thank you. That's really sweet. Thank you.
I'm just curious, like who inspires you? Who do you follow? There's some great people in this office. I'll tell you that,
Dr. Hank has been like a huge like mentor. Also Dr. Pompa, like I would not be here today if it wasn't for him. He completely changed my life. He's the one who taught me about mercury toxicity. I didn't even know I had it until I met him. And so he's like, I don't even understand like what our relationship is, because he's sometimes feels like I don't know, he's just this, and he's probably does this for so many people. He's just so like phenomenal. I'm thinking about who else. There's so many people.
No, that's fine. Like, one. I mean,
so I had really great teachers in school. Like there were some really, really great people. Dr. Brandon Lindell was the person who I learned about fibromyalgia and silent ruptures and breast implants from, which I don't even think he just said it really quick in an immunology seminar. I don't think he even understands. Like I tried to tell him after the fact, and he just was like, okay, cool.
But it stuck with you.
It was like the piece, right? Yeah. Sarah Russell, who's a kind of like mercury expert in Italy. She's been like a phenomenal. She was like the only person who added an ingredient to my formula.
Wow.
So I credit her, because it's like a by women formula. Like I made the formula myself. Everyone's always like, oh, so who made the formula? Like who? Because like they know I'm talking to all these brilliant people, but I just have to like, no, I made it. But Sarah Russell did add quercetin. And I was like back and forth about quercetin because I knew it was like great for MMP9, but she was like definitely add it. So like, okay. She's really great. And she does health coaching for people from Italy. Dr. Boyd Haley, who's the person who invented aramide, which is the drug that's in, and of course, Dr. Jack Miller, who introduced me to the work of Dr. Boyd Haley, and his mentor, Dr. Lee Cowden, are people whose work, like, I wouldn't know anything I know if it wasn't for them. So,
wow. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. Dr. Shane Morris, who owns the lab that tests my formula, phenomenal, like, person. Like, I like just love everything he does. So
yeah, so cool. I'm a big reader. Are there like a top 1 to 3 books that like stick out for you that you're like, you know what, anybody who's listening, they should read those
Well,
books.
what do you want to learn about? It depends. There's like a million books.
I know, and I hate that because I was asked the same question, and I'm like, where do I go? There's so many in personal development that had an impact on me. And then there's so many in the health world.
Okay, so as far as like mercury, like even though Andy Cutler's method, like I think it's problematic to follow religiously, there's still great takeaways. So he has a book called The Mercury Detoxification Manual, and I think it's such a great cliff notes for anyone who wants to really understand mercury. Like, where did I get it from?
Okay.
Why do I have it? Like, am I eliminating it? What should I avoid that could make me sicker? Super important, because most of the things that work for people, like gut cleansing, you know, like something that you think is going to really help you, and maybe your natural health practitioner wants to start there, but you're toxic, it's going to make you sicker. So it can really help people. And then for me, like the work of Carolyn Mace who's a medical intuitive, and she's had books since like the 90s about the spiritual cause of like disease and the way like our chakra systems work in conjunction with our organ systems, and mindset around health and healing, and like why people don't heal, and contracts around like our choices and like things, all of those things. So every time I listen to her work, I have a new experience of what it means, and it really like illuminates, or like she says, animates my experience. So for me, that she's been really amazing. So
I love that. A couple more questions. We'll wrap it up.
Okay.
What do you have any like hacks or rituals or practices that you do on like a regular basis?
Sure. So many. Tons.
I mean, we're just here in Dr. Hank's lab. I mean, there's like 20 different hacks you could do here, but.
So obviously, like, it's just, there's like the really basic things. I kind of like, after becoming an expert at like all of the things, like all of the nutrients and herbs and things, I really just think that we're coming to a place where it boils down to like these really basic things that are unfortunately not as accessible as they should be. Like, for example, using something like platelet-rich plasma of your own cells in an IV. Like, I feel that if everyone who went to the hospital with anything wrong were to just immediately get an infusion with their own PRP, that it's like, you know, when I had COVID, that's what I did, and it fixed me. Like, it was like instant.
Yeah.
This is like in your own cells. So when you pull blood out of the body, like if you donate blood, you are, and I'm explaining what was explained to me by Dr. Rafael Gonzalez, who I should have also mentioned, phenomenal mentor. When you pull blood out of the body, it immediately starts to signal the bone marrow to start to release like these growth factors. And so even if you just donate blood, you're going to get a physiological boost the following day, because you're mobilizing all these growth factors from the bone. And when you remove blood and then you separate it and you take your your PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma, that is and usually it's like later in the blood draw, because remember, you're getting that mobilization. So there's factors in how to remove the plasma correctly, and how to separate it correctly, and what the person should and shouldn't consume that day. And there's a lot of research you can find online or on PubMed, like things like caffeine don't want around that draw. But anyways, just taking that PRP and then your own vital, like, it's amazing, right? And then you put it back in your body, and it can even be like blood doping. So you could use it for just like, you know, if you want to feel really
Lance
good
Armstrong.
one day. What?
Like Lance Armstrong, right?
Well, I would say don't do it ethically if you're competing.
Yeah.
If you just need to feel good for a particular event, or something. So that's like that's a recent thing. I'm just like, whoa, if we were just all utilizing our PRP more. Obviously, stem cells. It's so complicated, and I know there's a lot of bad players, and we don't regulatorily, it's difficult. But if you get good quality stem cells in an IV, I mean, I think it's not going to touch your toxicity. If you have it, you have to clear yourself. But when it comes to regenerating the body, stem cells,
stem cells. That's it.
I hope to God that these become more accessible in the future.
Yeah.
So it's like these simple things, and then you could do these simple things and then not spend years and years and years like tinkering downstream with pathways and trying to get the right little like enzymes to convert. But it's sunshine. Okay, like nature. All I'm not gonna like go over basics. I was just trying to think about some things.
There's some really high end stuff that is, and I love that, because you are a biohacker. You got all you're in here doing all cool stuff. But at the simplest level, like someone who's like geeked out on these, I think you reach this point where you're like, you're such an expert, like you said, you're like, wow, but if people just did these things, they would probably be pretty good. So
They could
I
probably
like
avoid
that
like a
balance.
lot of the like this you
Yeah.
know, it's like, well, maybe you just need a stem cell. Maybe you just need to like chelate and then clear your gut, because anyone with chronic anything ends up with GI everything. I did a fecal matter transplant 3 times.
Wow.
Was needed, you know, like I was dysbiotic from all the, so that was huge. But
Wow.
you know, if you just clean the gut or clear the toxicity, clean the gut, and then regenerate with the right things,
Yeah.
that's like 1, 2, 3, right?
Yep. Love that.
It took me like years to figure that out, though. Many
Yeah.
years. So
Thank God, though, because now that was your journey, and now you get to help others do
just
it
go
faster.
faster.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Hopefully, yeah. Not, yeah.
Obviously, thank you so much for being on the show. And so last but not least, where can people find you and everything that you're doing, all the exciting projects that you're working on?
So the website for my formula is drkaytes.com, drkaytes.com. Or they can just search probably for Silicone Support formula and they'll probably find it. And or Instagram at Dr. Kayte. And there's, you know, you could find all the other stuff like in the link tree.
Yeah. Awesome. Dr. Kayte Susse, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. Like I feel really like filled up by this conversation, and you made me feel like really good. Thank you. I appreciate everything you're doing.
Honored. Thank you.
Okay.